All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got 2 weeks left. This is Rogue. She's a baby. Anyway, we got 2 weeks left. That means 2 video lessons. That's today, and that is next Monday. Now, I need you guys to stay in it. We got 2 weeks. You guys can hang in there for that much longer. We're doing the best we can on our end. Keep in contact with teachers. Make sure you're getting your work done to the best of your ability, things of that nature. And 2 weeks. Hang in there, guys. 2 more weeks, and then you're free. Summer. It's really summer, not like this pseudo crazy summer thing that we've got going on right now. Now, before I hop into the lesson for this week, I need to talk about student council. Now, we typically do student council elections in April. We do it through the history classes because who better to deal with elections in the electoral process than the teachers who talk about elections in the electoral process and how it works and things of that nature. Now, we didn't get to do elections, so we're going to kind of try to take a different spin on this. And Ms. Johnson, counselor, has asked me to talk about this a little bit in the beginning of this video. Now, if you are interested in student council, interested in being a part of the leadership of RHS, helping make decisions, plan events, stuff of that nature, you need to email Miss Johnson, or you can email your history teacher, which we will promptly direct those back to Miss Johnson because she knows a lot more about this stuff than we do, if you're interested. Now, a couple things you need to know about student council. Student council is a class. It is an elective class, meaning you will have to drop an elective at RHS next year in order to be in student council. Now, for some of you, that's sports. I know it's a hard decision. Some of you, that's band. Some of you, that's choir. Some of you, it's home ec or some other underwater basket weaving or something stupid. Or not stupid, backtrack, something not conventionally school-ish. But you have to drop an elective in order to be in student council. Second part of that is student council it's a lot of work. You're part of the leadership. You're part of the decision-making process. You're part of planning events and making sure those run and things like that. And that entails a lot of work. And with student council, that work starts before school. So during the summer, leading up to school, end of July, early August, you will have things to do. You will have work and stuff you have to do for student council. Now, if all of that interests you and you're like, heck yes, go get her, let's do it, email Miss Johnson or email your history teacher, and we will pass it on to Miss Johnson. We don't know really what we're going to do selection-wise at this point, but if you're interested, let us know. That way we can put your name in the hat and figure out what's going to happen with that. And we're going to try to have more to come later this week and figure out the process on that. All right, announcements done. Now, history lesson for this week. We're going to take a break from that chronological stuff that we've been doing with Compromise of 1820, Compromise of 1850, Lincoln Douglas debates in 1856, Bleeding Kansas in 54, Harper Raid of Harper's Ferry in 56. We're going to take a break from that. All right, we're going to go in a little bit different direction. Next week, I plan to talk in depth about some of the major turning points of the Civil War, how they were fought, what they meant, casualty numbers, how it affects the war, and how things change. Today, I want to talk about the war itself. What impact does the war have besides we know the fracture of the nation and this, but what kind of social impact? How did people view this war? How did they see it? How did they see it going? Things of that nature. If you are in my history class or if you've been in one of my tutorials where I talk about war or anything, you know how much I have an affinity for talking about how humankind likes to stand in front of each other with lines with guns and shoot. Now that style of fighting is going to be very prevalent in the Civil War, but advancements in technology, in weaponry and things like that are going to make this a very, very nasty, bloody event. Now, we're going to look at some of that technology, people's points of views, We're going to look at some of the medical technology, some of the medical things that happened during the Civil War, things that make you kind of go, you, and oh my God, and I can't believe that happened, and kind of, the Civil War there's so many casualties and wounds that medical science is going to advance rapidly. Medical science tends to do that with war because people have to learn things on the fly, and people find out all kinds of new stuff. Like they discovered penicillin because of not the Civil War, one of the world wars, but those things come out of war because they're really bad conflicts. So we're going to look at some of the medical stuff, and then kind of one of the biggest things that we're going to look at. I guess not really the biggest thing. Another thing I want to look at is photography. Cameras are a thing now. People can take pictures. And cameras are small enough. By small enough, I mean they're still, I'm sitting down. This tall, this big. And you have to set up all this stuff with the shutter and everything to take the picture. But you can move them to battlefields, and we're going to have some of the very first pictures of battlefields at places like Antietam, which is a very bloody, nasty battle in the war. So we're going to look at some of that and how that impact shapes. The photos kind of shape the impact of the war versus on the social side. Now, to start off, I want to talk about that early view of the war. And a lot of that stems around one of the first major battles of the Civil War, the Picnic Battle. Now, I want to say real quick, addendum here. Civil War names, almost every battle has two. One that the northern side gave them, and one that the southern side gave them. So these two, depending, I just kind of on what stuck really with historians' minds. Person like me, I know both the names of a lot of them, so I will tend to flip back and forth. So I apologize for that. I'm only talking about one battle here, so whatever name I call it, it's the same battle. But a lot of times, the Confederates, the southern side, would name battles after the nearest city or town. So we get Prairie Grove, Pea Ridge, Vicksburg, Antietam, Gettysburg. Whereas the northern side would name it after typically closest watermark. Battle of Wilson's Creek, Battle of Bull Run, things like that. The Red River Campaign, that's in lower part of Arkansas. So there's usually two different names. A lot of the big ones have that one name, like Gettysburg is Gettysburg on both the north and the south. But if I flip back and forth, I'm sorry. But the biggest thing with this first battle is not like the battle, but it's what happens around the outside of the battle. All right. So let's get started. We're going to talk about the first battle of Manassas, or First Battle of Bull Run. All right, so the worst picnic ever, aka the First Battle of Manassas or the First Battle of Bull Run. This is called the worst picnic ever because, believe it or not, there was an actual picnic at this Civil War battle. Now, this Civil War battle takes place in July of 1861, only three or so months after the shelling of Fort Sumter, and at this point, the fighting between the two sides had not escalated to what it will become. No ball. And people in the North had a perception that this war was going to be swiftly and easily won. Boy, were they wrong. So in late July, you have Brigadier General, what's his name? God bless myself. I can't remember his name, guys. Never mind. Brigadier General Irvin McDowell. He is going to march about 28,000 Union troops towards General Pierre T. Beauregard on the Confederate side, where some of their troops had amassed. He actually had about 32,000 troops. Among them, one of his leading generals is going to be a guy named Stonewall Jackson, who is a very, very well-known Civil War leader. Now, as McDowell marches his troops towards, Pierre T. Beauregard, Um, a lot of people in the area kind of want to see the military might of the Union Army. They have this idea that this war is going to be so swiftly stamped out and won that it's going to be an easy feat. So they decide to have a picnic, a legitimate picnic. Now, this place is right outside of, it's in Virginia, not very far from Washington, D.C., honestly. So a bunch of higher socioeconomic people decide to have a picnic a few miles away and overseeing the battlefield at the Bull Run. And, well, the biggest part of this is this perception that this war is going to be swiftly and easily won gets tossed out the window. It's gone. Bye-bye. So McDowell starts his advances and attacks towards Beauregard's troops, and you got Stonewall Jackson there, and Stonewall Jackson's commanding the front lines. And basically they meet a stalemate. I mean, the South does have superior numbers at this point. They're encamped, so the Union Army is marching on them, which tactically is not always the best decision. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But they have the ability to know that its advance is coming, so they can kind of prepare, and they prepare and they set up the barrier in order to hold their ground in Manassas. Now, the Union side is going to get busted pretty bad and beat up pretty bad, and it's going to force the troops to start scrambling and reacting, because at this point you have two sides of the military with a bunch of troops, because remember, like, the army had to basically split in two because some people supported the North, some people supported the South, so the soldiers went different ways. So in order to fill out the ranks, you had a lot of, farmers with their pitchforks, good old boys coming in, and farmers off fresh out the fields to come and fight this war. So you had a very poorly trained military. You have very great leaders, but a very poorly trained actual troop body and militias to choose from to fight this war. And not a lot of them had the discipline of regulars in the army. So as the Confederate side started to overwhelm and overrun the Union, you see a massive retreat of those Union arms, and a lot of them start scrambling through the picnics. They start scrambling and running through where these people are, and these people who have camped out to watch this swift military action, the swift end of this insurrection, well, they're in for a rude awakening. And the biggest thing about this is, can you honestly think, like, if there's going to be a war battle, do you want to have a picnic anywhere near that, regardless of the technology at the time? No. People thought that this was going to be this simple, and this is how it's going to end. Well, they're going to get a very, very rude awakening, and this is going to unleash this massive kind of destructive force of this new conflict with these new technologies that are going to really harm and really be disastrous for the people of America. So with that, let's look at some guns, some cannons, and some pictures of the battlefield. All right. Now I'm going to try not to get long-winded because I really like this part. So let's start by looking at some guns. Up on the screen, you should be seeing a breakdown of a bunch of different rifles used throughout the Civil War. You're going to have the 1861 Springfield rifle, the 1855 Springfield rifle. These are both muskets, meaning they have a very similar firing mechanism that we saw from like the Revolutionary War. You load it one down, you pull the hammer back, you shoot, you get your one shot, and that is the end-all be-all of it. These are going to be the standard issue weapons for both sides throughout the conflict. Now, these are, the 1855 was the original, and they will eventually switch to the 1861 Springfield rifle because 1861 is far more durable. It doesn't clog and jam as easy as the 1855 did. These usually have an effective range of around 200 to 300 yards. So if you can think about that, 2 to 3 football fields standing between you and your opponent, and you can hit them if you're a good enough shot. The effective range is kind of, if you best case scenario, it's you could hit something at 300 yards. So, but this should expand the battlefield, but we still have one shot. So the battlefield's still going to be kind of small and concise, at least in terms of distance between the two different lines. Because you get one shot, and then you can see there's this nice little saber and these nice little pointy things on there, bayonets and whatnot. Then you charge, and you kind of play stabby with each other. Now these are really nothing new. We have rifling, which means the cartridge spins as it comes out of the rifle, giving it stability as it's going through the air and allowing it to cut through the air, which makes it accurate. So we no longer have bullets flying off in all these different crazy directions. Now they're spinning and they're going straight. You have a lot of the officers are going to hold these revolvers, the Remington and the Colt. These are going to be some of the first revolvers introduced into warfare. They're typically going to be for high-ranking officers and cavalry mounted, so they can shoot them while riding a horse because they're one-handed operated. But gun-wise, the big one is the Sharps carbine, which also contains one shot, but it has an effective range of over 500 yards. It's actually lethal at 1,000 if you can hit your target. So that's going to be kind of your sniper weapon for those of you who play like Fortnite and Call of Duty and stuff like that. But then you're going to have the Spencer repeating rifle. This thing is not only going to change the war because it's going to be given to cavalry mounted troops, but it is going to be the gun that will be copied by Henry later on in the war, Henry Rifle Arms Company, and later Winchester to create the Winchester repeating rifle, which is widely known as the rifle that won the West. So the one that they're going to use when they're fighting the Indians. If you've ever played like Red Dead Redemption, this is the good rifle. This is the one you want. Now the original Spencer version holds about 7 rounds, and they're fed in through the stock, the part that sits on your shoulder, and you have a lever. You shoot, and you're loaded and you're ready to go again. As opposed to shoot, all right, let me get the bullet out, rip the cartridge open, pour this down, ram it down in there, and away we go with round number 2. You know, having 30 to 45 seconds in between each shot. Now you're a click away and you can continue to fire. These early Spencer models had an effective range of about 200 to 300 yards as well. So they were lethal. And they're going to spawn the Henry repeating arms variety and the Winchester variety, which are not known for their range, but both the Henry and the Winchester can hold up to 15 rounds, so 15 bullets and 15 shots, and you could empty it in under 30 seconds if you're really moving. So that's kind of a real new dynamic that this war is going to introduce, along with a whole bunch of cannons, which now we should have a 20-pound Parrott cannon, or a Parrott gun on the screen. They make these in a bunch of different varieties. I'm just going to talk about, use this image for this one. The 20 pound relates to the mass weight of the shot that is put in it. And these things, they loaded them up with all different kinds of stuff. You had cluster shots, you had straight shots. Sometimes you had a bunch of stuff that was kind of haphazardly melted together that would bust on impact like a shotgun. If you've ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean where they shoot the one cannonball with the chain and it whips, they shot those out of these too. These, if you ever want to know how to use why Pythagorean theorem is a good thing, and finding angles and all that trigonometry stuff, you use that to find the effective firing range of these cannons. They would go for distance. You aim it at about 45 degrees. You can short it. You can lob them high. And they're movable. You can hook them to horses. You can tow them around with you. So this brings artillery to the battlefield. Now, all these new weapons are going to breed a different type of carnage. So Briefly, we're going to talk about the Battle of Antietam. This is the single bloodiest day in American history. The Battle of Antietam is fought in Maryland between George McClellan, this guy, and Robert E. Lee, very famous Southern general. Now, the thing with this battle is it is heavily photographed, so we will look at pictures. But at the end of the day, the battle was a draw. You have McClellan with 87,000 troops versus Lee with 32,000 troops, and they managed to fight to a stalemate. McClellan retreats. McClellan will get fired after this for not actually pursuing Lee as Lee retreats. But we're left with a lot of damage, carnage, and destruction. As you can see, we've got bodies around one of those Parrott cannons just laying there. It's not a pretty sight. This next picture is known as the Bloody Lane. This is a trench along the outside of one of the properties that they fought, where bodies were just kind of scooped in and fell into. And here's another picture of the Bloody Lane. And this is a horrible conflict. And these pictures are going to make it in newspapers. And it's going to change people's perceptions of the war. And with these new weapons comes new medical needs and new things that are going to pop up medically that are going to kind of show the destruction and damage of this war. So what we've got now is this is a field surgeon's kit from the Civil War. You can see it's got a bunch of things, but the big one you can probably see at the top is the giant saw. A lot of times during the Civil War, they just kind of cut it off. Arm cut off. Now, the injuries in the Civil War are going to be kind of wild and different. We're going to look at some pictures, so warning. Of the different things that with these new higher accuracy rifles and new types of artillery that are going to come out, they're going to do lots of damage. As you can see here, this poor fella, he took a mini ball fired out of probably one of those Sharps carbines to the noodle. He took one right to the face. And as you can see, the damage where the mini ball hits him, and it hits him kind of right in that sinus region, right up in here, and rattles around and splits open his face. Now, this gentleman does survive, obviously. I look at him, but you can see, like, this is what some of the soldiers are coming back from the battlefield looking like. There's another musket wound to the face. I'm almost positive that this gentleman also received some shrapnel from like a cluster shot artillery shell or grape shot or something like that, ricocheting off his face. That's why his face is all swollen like that. But a lot of the times in the field, you know, if you get shot in the arm or you have an injury to your arm or some kind of extremity, like say it's right here, well, they're just gonna cut my arm off. Now, I'm not gonna show you a picture of this like I would in class. If you feel the need to like look it up, more power to you. But a lot of times gangrene would set in, and gangrene is basically your flesh is become necrotic. It is rotting and dying while it's still attached to your body. And in order to keep that infection from spreading into the blood further, normally if there's an injury, they just kind of cut it off. And they move forward and they cut off the limbs because then they can cauterize the wound and stop the infection, stop gangrene from happening, and they can get ahead of it. Because once you have gangrene, it's done. It has to come off. There's no stopping it. It has to be removed. So you have guys that end up like this poor gentleman here. And, he lost all of his limbs. Now, all of this isn't for naught. Because, like I said at the very beginning of this video, a lot of medical advances come out of wartime situations. In the Civil War, we're going to see the rise of prosthetics. We're going to see people with, fake legs and fake arms. And the prosthetics business is going to really take off, and it's going to start evolving into more of what we have today. Also, we're going to see a rise in plastic surgery. like that first guy with the hole in the face. We're going to start experimenting with plastic surgery and trying to fix these injuries and taking skin from one place to the other to try to fix and amend some of these injuries that are going to occur, and that's going to come out of the Civil War. A lot of work with orthopedics, which are your bones, because of all the amputations, the ability of some of these different types of weapons to hit you, even if it's just a ricochet and shatter and wreck your bones, is going to lead to a rise in orthopedics. And then, of course, there's wound cleaning, because a lot of the times, we had to keep wounds clean to keep gangrene from coming in. Now, in these field hospitals, there was no anesthetic. So a lot of the time, if you ever heard the term, it's time to bite the bullet, that is usually alluded to from the Civil War, because they give you a bullet, bite down in your teeth. All right, we're going to start sawing, because there's no anesthetic. There's no way to numb it. You either had to drink the whiskey and deal with it, or deal with it because they're going to cut it off anyway, or you die. So there's a lot of different things that come out of this, but at the end of the day, this is about this changing, like this public perception. It starts with this public perception of this is going to be easy. We can do this. This will be swift. To this long, drawn out, bloody conflict where you're having 25,000 people a day die. And remember, these aren't just 25,000 people from different countries. These are 25,000 Americans. Whether you're northern, southern, it doesn't matter. You are Americans dying in this conflict, and a lot of horrific injuries that are now, as you can see, we have pictures, are now documented and being pushed out to the public for them to see the nature of this war. And all of these feelings are going to kind of culminate after in Reconstruction, but that's a conversation for another day, which we're probably not going to get to. But hope you guys have a great Monday. Remember, student council, email Miss Johnson or your history teacher. Have a good Monday.